All right. We are now live. Moneyline MMA coverage. UFC Nashville. Coming to my block of the woods this weekend, July 12th. Headlined by Derek Lewis versus Taliesin Texiera, the battle of heavyweights. This does not have any title implications whatsoever, at least right now in the heavyweight division, but there's no denying the excitement that Derek Lewis brings to any fight he fights in. And in this case, an undefeated prospect, Taliesin Texiera, who likely brings a little bit more technicality in terms of the boxing game to the stage. He's not as much of a one-punch knockout threat as Derek Lewis, of course. But in any case, very exciting fight for UFC Nashville. There's a bunch of other great fights sprinkled into this card that we'll get into tonight for Jose and I's picks. Before we get too quick into UFC Nashville's picks, let's just quick get a recap on UFC 317. UFC 317 took place not last weekend, but the weekend before, the 4th of July. Topuria versus Oliveira. I mean, might as well start from the top. Jose and I both predicting Charles Oliveira to beat Ilia Topuria. That did not go out well for us. He took the loss. Ilia got the first round finish, made it look somewhat easy, sad to say. Alexander Pantoja was a guy Jose and I both picked to win and got the job done against Carl France, defending his belt yet again. Moving up on the pound-for-pound list as he deserves. Let's give more credit to Pantoja as credit is due. The man is dominating his division and has walked through it similar, I would argue, to how Izzy walked through middleweight when he was a champ. So we all respected Izzy like he was one of the baddest dudes on the planet. We should all think the same about Pantoja. There's few men at that weight class specifically that would be able to dethrone Pantoja at this time. Continuing down the card, boy, does Josh Van look exciting. Talk about who might be next for Pantoja after he's kind of ran through the top of that division in flyweight, and all of a sudden, here comes Josh Van. Wow, is all I can really say. 2 fights in 1 month, and the second of them being against a guy as good as Royval. That is nuts. He went in there and decisively won the fight. It was a decision win, but I think anyone who really thought Royval earned that decision must have missed a little bit of that fight. Even though I picked Royval, I knew that was not a win going into the judge's decision. So props to Van. It seems like he set himself up perfectly fighting on the same card as Pantoja there to get the next title shot at flyweight. So expect that to come. Josh Van could rival. I might have to double check, man, but unless you know off the top of your head, Jose, he's going to be close to John Jones. Like, Josh Van is not even 24, and he will be challenging for a belt. I don't remember exactly how old John Jones was, but that's around how old he was to be the youngest UFC champ of all time.
I think John Jones was younger. I think he was 21.
Oh, wow, he
So
was 21. Okay.
yeah, so he
I
was
could.
pretty young already. But yeah, maybe you want to double check that. But I think he was 21 or 20, at least 23. But I think 24 already seems a little too old for John Jones.
Yeah, it's been so long. It was in 2000. Yeah, I'd have to look that up. I'd have to look that up because it's just been so long. Yeah, you're right. I think it was 21. I think you might be right about that. But in any case, so in that case, Josh Van is not approaching the record. But still, man, at least in the most recent few years of the UFC, man, wow, being under 25 champ is nuts. That's all I gotta say. At least he's not a champ yet, but challenge for it. Um, yeah, going from there, Benil Dariush beating Renato Moicano. That was one that Jose and I disagreed on, I believe. And Jose got the better side of that one with Benil Dariush, the older man, getting the win against Renato by decision. Renato goes from challenging for the belt to quick downfall. Quick downfall. So that pretty much wraps up our picks. The last one that might be worth mentioning from UFC 317, Peyton Talbot. Really, the UFC 317, a card of young guns. I mean, Peyton Talbot, man, he's been doing great too. He wins the decision against Felipe Lima, and that was a guy I had as my one weight, and I should have put him higher clearly. Moving forward, though, that's a quick recap. UFC 317. Moving forward to UFC Nashville, and anyone who's new here, we pick 5 fights of what is currently scheduled to be 12 fights for UFC Nashville. We're picking 5, and we're weighing those 5 picks in order of confidence, with 5 weight being the most confident pick. 1 weight, of course, the least confident of those 5. Jose and I mix those picks separately and then just confer right before we hit the record button or the live button. just so we know what order we're going in, because we're going to start with our locks of the week first. So that said, with my lock of the week for UFC Nashville, in which is worth noting that I will get to see in person with Jose. We're excited for that here this Saturday at the Bridgestone Arena. I'm going to start with my 5-weight. We're going straight into one of the deep ends of the card. That is the co-main event between Stephen Thompson, Wonderboy, and Gabriel Bonfim. This is a classic iteration of old versus new. Gabriel Bonfim is 27 years old, still considered a decently touted prospect. He did lose 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago now, to Nicholas Dalby, but otherwise, Gabriel Bonfim has been on a tear. That one loss to Nicholas Dalby being the one blemish on his record. He would otherwise be undefeated. He's coming off 2 wins, most recently Chaos Williams, in which he choked him out. Wonderboy Thompson, man, he had a great fight against Joaquin Buckley, and I would say he was beating Joaquin Buckley. The stat sheet's going to say, got KO'd, lost to Buckley by knockout. But in all reality, if he was able to get through the rest of that round, he was going to win the fight, I think, by decision. At least, 19-18 decision type of situation. So tough for Wonderboy Stephen Thompson to get finished there in a situation where he should have honestly got the win, or he was at least fighting better until the power got the best of him. And that's part of the reason why I'm so confident to pick against him Saturday night, as my 5-weight is on Gabriel Bonfim. Gabriel Bonfim, as I mentioned, is a young gun, and he comes in with a lot of aggressiveness. He's got 13 submission finishes and 0 submission losses. He's also got 3 KO wins, only been finished 1 time, and that was, of course, by Nicholas Dalby, in which it was not even a KO situation. It was just the ref had to stop it because it was like a knockdown into punches on the ground kind of situation. That said, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, just based on his style, is very methodical in his striking, right? Stephen Thompson can be definitely relied upon to have a positive striking differential. He likes to land more than he takes, and he tries to avoid the big shots, but it clearly doesn't always work, as he's gotten KO'd. And then before that, he got submitted by Shavkat, and Shavkat's a stud. You can't knock him for that loss. Shavkat deserves the next title shot, but in any case, Stephen Thompson's also struggled against some of those top-end performers, earlier in 2021. Bilal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, those guys were still, in the primes of their career, and he loses by decision. He kind of got beat, especially on the feet by Bilal. So that's just one of those situations where I would expect Gabriel Bonfim to utilize his wrestling as he feels fit. Stephen Thompson on the books has a 63% takedown defense. I don't think that's going to fare well enough for him. I think, sure, he might have a little bit more boxing acumen to get a positive striking differential, but Gabriel Bonfim, by far, is going to bring the power, and Gabriel Bonfim, by far, in my opinion, is going to bring the aggressiveness. I think he's going to wait it out. I think maybe he waits to the second round to try landing takedowns. Gabriel's not necessarily like a chain wrestler. He's not going to go in there round 1, land a takedown, and try and choke Wonderboy out. That's not his style. In fact, it took almost until the round 2 finish for him to choke out Chaos Williams. But he's going to read Stephen Wonderboy. He's going to kind of catch his marks, see what his timings are, and he's going to go in and get himself at least Stephen Wonderboy's back to the cage, and he's at least going to get in a clinch scenario and start to grind away that way, in my opinion. So Gabriel Bonfim, in my opinion, is a very confident, strong pick for this weekend. He is a heavy favorite. It comes along with a high price tag. He's minus 430, just over 4-1 odds to win that fight. Stephen Thompson at plus 300. So that pick being made at quite steep odds, but I really think it's worth it. Gabriel Bonfim, my most confident pick of Saturday afternoon. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, Nick. So for this one, I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to go with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He is my 2-weight, though. I have low confidence in him, just mostly because just age and just things haven't gone his way as of lately. But he's been going against, Shavkat and Joaquin Buckley. And then before that, he went against Kevin Holland, who's been up or down. So it just varies who, what version of Kevin Holland shows up. But time and time again, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he shows up. And he's technical, and I think he just uses his strengths to his advantage, which in this case is going to be his reach. He's going to have a 2.5 inch reach advantage over Bonfim, and I think that's gonna ultimately get him to win this fight. I think by unanimous decision. I don't see him finishing Bonfim, and When it comes to the grappling department, I do think Bonfim is going to be the better grappler 100%. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is historically like known not to do well against grapplers, and but like you said, I don't think Bonfim is going to be forcing the takedowns. He's going to read and react a little more, and then time it and look for it more in the later in the fight, and just use it to his advantage. I think. Um, to get ground to get cage time pretty much and control time overall, but I think Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is gonna do a good job of just piecing him up and ultimately not make it such an easy um make it easy for Bonfim to want to shoot in. Like I think he's gonna make him pay for that. But it's just crazy, man. Like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is 42 years old and still going at it. 17 wins, 8 losses. While Bonfim, he's 27 and he has the same number of wins, both 17 and 17. But Wonderboy Thompson's just been in the UFC for so long, and he's gone through and fought the who's of the former champions. He's fought for the title himself numerous times, and as of lately, it's just giving him like up and coming contenders. And if Bonfim wins this, like yeah, he's gonna start to get tougher challenges. So it sucks to say, like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, I am choosing him, and he is kind of a what is it like gate? Not was it like gateway fighter, but he is someone that if you can beat him, okay, let's see, let's move you up and keep challenging you. And like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he's not going to fight for the title soon, not at all. And I just don't see him ever fighting again for the title, to be honest. But I do see him still racking up at least some good wins. Maybe not finishes and spectacular KOs, but I do see him at least being able to use his vet experience and still get a unanimous decision win here. So that's what I'm banking on. I'm banking on him sticking true to his karate stance, using his length is to his own advantage and his fight IQ from his vet experience. I think all that is ultimately going to help him get a decision win. If not, again, he is my two weight. Very low confidence because Bonfim can always just later in the late second round and third round just completely neutralize Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on the feet and just take him down and hold him down and just start beating them and racking up points from there. So this one, I have low confidence, but I'm going with the vet Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.
Okay. Yeah, I think you make some decent points there, and Wonderboy is going to be a tough opponent. Even if I end up being correct in this disagreement, it's not going to be easy for Bonfim. And to be honest, like if I had to get really granular with it, I wouldn't be surprised if Bonfim loses the first round and comes back and wins round 2 and 3 to secure my win in this disagreement. But really, anything could happen. I mean, I totally agree that Stephen Wonderboy, no matter how old he is, his technique, his karate style, like that's always going to be on point. And I think no matter what, Bonfim's going to have to accept some level of damage to get a takedown, unless he lands some sort of knockdown via strikes. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, man. I like what I'm seeing lately out of Bonfim's striking, considering he was able to stand with Chaos Williams and do what he did. But no doubting that Stephen Wonderboy is such a different fighter that it's also hard to be like, okay, he did it with Chaos, then he can do it with Stephen, because they're just such different fighters. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but in any case, still excited. Bonfim was able to outstrike Chaos. I think he's going to at least hold his own on the feet, and with that, she'll win the fight. So
Yeah, so that's when that said, we can go on to my five way. I'm just gonna wrap it up. Yeah, like you got Gabriel Bonfim as your five way, and I got Wonder Boy as my two weight. And
yes,
for my
sir.
five weight, this will come over kick back to the prelims actually, and this is going to be the main event of the prelims, and it's going to be the welterweight bout between Chris Curtis and Max Griffin. And right now, let me actually pull it up. I actually closed my FanDuel odds
I don't
page,
blame you.
but
I think it's like even, but I'd have to double check.
yeah,
Um,
I'm seeing right now.
oh
Well,
wow,
as of the
Chris
latest
Curtis is a huge
refresh,
favorite. Never mind.
he he is. I thought he was for some reason going to be the underdog in this one, and I was getting ready to say that, like, but no. In this case, Max Griffin is the underdog at plus 230, while Chris
Yeah.
Curtis is the betting favorite at minus 310. And I like that. I agree. Like Chris Curtis, I mean, we've seen him like he's fought welterweight before, but we've seen him obviously most recently at 185 middleweight, and I just think like coming down to welterweight, some people get worried like oh, like, do they lose power? I think Chris Curtis is just going to be faster. I think that's what's it. I think he's going to be faster, but I think he'll still have power carry over. And it's just insane. Like, both these fighters in their later 30s and just have a ton of experience. But I think Chris Curtis slightly has better experience than Max Griffin. Both have faced big names, but Chris Curtis, I think, has come on top over some bigger names. And even as a more recent, like a little over 3 years ago now, but like almost 3 years ago, Joaquin Buckley, and then at one point Brandon Allen, right before Brandon Allen went on his tear. So and most recently, a little over a year ago, he won split decision against Marc Andre Barrial, but then gets a rematch with Brandon Allen, loses split decision, and then gets finished by Roman Kopilov. And I just think like him moving down to welterweight is actually a good move on his end. He's not the biggest 185er, but he's just a thick guy. So I think at 170, he's just overall just even though Max Griffin is going to be slightly taller, I just think at 170, Chris Curtis is just going to uh look and feel just thicker, stronger, and heavier. Um, compared because he's going to be going against just again Max Griffin and Max Griffin, he's got phenomenal boxing and he only has a half-inch reach advantage over Chris Curtis, but Chris Curtis himself, both these guys throw a high volume of punches, but they also take a lot of damage. I mean, Max Griffin, he lands 3.75 significant strikes per minute, but he absorbs 3.66. Chris Curtis lands 6.16 and absorbs 6.43. So both guys take a lot of damage back to what they're throwing out, but I'm banking on the power that Chris Curtis will have behind his punches, and he does throw at a slightly higher rate than Max Griffin. So I think this one, I do like Chris Curtis getting the win, and I do like him getting a finish as well. Um, Specifically, obviously via KO slash TKO. He is also not. It's not like I don't think this will make much of a difference. I mean, I just sided with Wonder Boy, but like Chris Curtis is 37 years old. He's still at the tail end of like he could still have some of his prime left in him. Whereas Max Griffin, I don't know. I feel like we've seen the best, the true best of Max Griffin. We haven't seen in a minute, to be honest. That's the way I see it. I just haven't like a lot of his wins have just been coming by split. As of recently, just a lot of split or close calls. And Chris Curtis, he's been more of a defined finisher. Even though he did get a split loss to a split win, I mean, to Marc Andre Barrial and split loss to Brandon Allen, but he did get a finish over Joaquin Buckley, who we just saw could had the potential to be a contender, but he lost Kamaru Usman. But that being said, in this one, I'm taking Chris Curtis. He I could be wrong. I think these guys came out of the same camp out of Vegas with Strickland, but definitely Chris Curtis does. And that being said, like he comes out of a great camp, and he just, in my opinion, has just a better history in terms of just a better resume and more power behind his punches. And it's going to be mostly, I think, a fight on the feet. I doubt any of these guys are really going to try to take it to the ground. Definitely not Chris Curtis. And if Max Griffin does it, he's probably going to be tired because, again, he's mostly a boxer. So in this case, I think it's going to be a fun one on the feet. And if they're going to have to go toe to toe with punches, I like Chris Curtis because I think he's going to carry a little more power back down to welterweight with them. So that being said, I like Chris Curtis a lot. I think he's going to get the win. I think he's going to get a finish. He is my 5 weight. What are your thoughts on this one, Nick?
Man, so we will agree. We will agree on Chris Curtis there. I'm agreeing there. Um, Chris Curtis, a little less confident though. You went as high as 5 weight. For me, I'm going 2 weight. So actually, kind of a funny like reversal. In this case, we agree instead of disagree on our 5 and 2 weights. But I do agree on Chris Curtis. I think Chris Curtis is a better technical boxer in my opinion. Honestly, especially partially because Curtis is dropping down in weight from middleweight to welterweight. You mentioned that already. There's some concern I have with that weight cut. I don't think it will be a significant problem with him. If it's something he's done or we've seen before, and then him perform well afterwards. It's just mainly just like a thought. Like you're not used to cutting that much. How will you react to cutting that much? And I don't even know if Chris Curtis himself could answer that until Friday, right? Until weigh-ins, until we kind of figure it out, right? So that would be the one thing that I have a little bit of reservation on Chris Curtis, but I do agree otherwise. I think I pretty much throw out the stats. Like yeah, you can look at strikes landed, strikes absorbed, and you'll see that Max Griffin is a lot less active, right? Chris Curtis throws a lot more and he absorbs a lot more in return, and Max Griffin takes a lot less but throws a lot less, and it's kind of an even line for both fighters. And honestly, it's not those stats that I'm really looking at with this pick. I just think Chris Curtis is a better boxer overall. I don't at all anticipate Max Griffin to take this to the feet unless he feels extremely vulnerable. And that might happen if my prediction goes right in the sense that Chris Curtis is winning the boxing game. Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of respect for the opponents Chris Curtis has most recently lost to. He gets finished within the last couple seconds of his fight against Kopylov, but he was outstriking him on paper, right? Kopylov landed a takedown. We could argue what the judges would have said this way, that way, but Chris Curtis was right on him. And honestly, Max Griffin, he beat Jeremiah Wells, he beat Tim Means. I don't know. Max Griffin just hasn't been that active. Like Max Griffin fought twice in 2024, once in 2023. Like he has his first fight in 2025. He's got 3 fights since 2022. That's just not very active. Chris Curtis is out here. He's got one. This is his second already this year. He had 2 in 2024. He had 2 in 2023. He's out there doing dog things in my opinion. He's got 6 fights in the same time frame that Max Griffin has 3. So with that considered, I like Chris Curtis's activity. I like the fact that I think he's going to throw a little bit more, and in the end, that's just going to look a little bit better on the judges' scorecards. I'd like to say that this is almost a lock in my opinion. I'd be curious to see if you agree, Jose. Almost a lock that this goes over, and then we see this go to a decision. I mean, it's possible any puncher's chance can come alive, and this fight could get finished early. But I don't know, man. I see this as a decision fight all day long, and I see it going in Curtis's favor.
Ooh, I do see a finish just because of the power that Chris Curtis will come down. So I do think like, and the fact that he's been a lot more active too. Like, win or loss, like he's been active and he's even did at least a complete round with Nasruddin Imavov as well. So he's kind of like, I like the activity from Chris Curtis, and I think it's gonna just show like in this one. So yeah, regardless, I have him winning. But if there's gonna be one of these two fighters get the KO win, I'm banking everything obviously on Chris Curtis. So, but that being said, yeah, this one it could go the distance, but I do think Chris Curtis will have if he I do think he can get the finish though.
Okay. Okay, so we might disagree a little on that because I do understand Chris Curtis brings some power to the table, and maybe I'm biasing a little too much on recency because it has been since 2022 against Joaquin Buckley in which Chris Curtis has landed a finish. So it's possible. It's very likely that he does that again, especially when you look at him doing it against Joaquin Buckley is very impressive. Um, yeah, I would love to get that version of Chris Curtis. If we get the same version of Chris Curtis that beat and finished Joaquin Buckley on the feet, I would put all my entire bankroll on Chris Curtis beating Max Griffin for sure. There's no way Max Griffin would beat a good in prime Joaquin Buckley like that. So that's odd. We will agree. 7 combined confidence points there. May or may not be the MMA Lion lock of the week. But for now, it's Jose's 5 weight and his most confident pick. And with that, I'll take us to my 4 weight of Saturday afternoon. My 4 weight, I'm pretty excited about. Honestly, I'm going to be excited about all the fights I picked because I'm able to only pick 5. So I pretty much picked the 5 that I'm either most confident in or most excited to see. But with this, we're going to go back into the main event. That Chris Curtis Max Griffin fight, I believe, is going to be the main event of the prelims. We're going to take us up to the main card and specifically the feature fight, the third last fight of Saturday afternoon at UFC Nashville. And I'm looking at Steve Garcia versus Calvin Kattar. What an interesting matchup. I would almost call him a journeyman, Calvin Kattar. In a sense, we're getting back-to-back journeymen in UFC Nashville cards. I would call Corey Sandhagen and Rob Font sort of journeymen as well. And those are the main event fighters of our last UFC Nashville card. Here we are with Calvin Kattar, one of the other journeymen of the weight class similar. And how sad has it been for Calvin Kattar lately, man? He hasn't won a fight since 2022. That's crazy. Calvin Kattar is such a good fighter, and for him to not won a fight in almost 3 years now, in fact, over 3 years, because it was January of 2022, so it's actually been 3.5 years just about since he won a fight. And you got to consider the fact that he's fighting the absolute dogs, right? He's fighting former champ Sterling, contender Arnold Allen, Josh Emmett, the challenger, Yusuf Zalal, probably a future challenger. Those are all really tough names, and it's really hard to fault Calvin Cater for losing those fights. But I also can't help but sit here and feel like Calvin Cater just is, I don't know if a shell of himself is the right way to put it, but he's 37 years old. He hasn't won a fight since 2022. Yes, he's fighting good fighters. I don't know. So is Steve Garcia. I mean, Steve Garcia is absolutely finishing everyone in his path. So whether or not Steve Garcia has the same resume, which he definitely doesn't, he's going in there and finishing his opponents. He's got finishes against Chase Hooper. He's got finish against Mequisel Costa, and most recently Kyle Nelson. He's on a tear, honestly. His last 5 wins in a row, all by finish. 2 in 2022. He had a 2024, excuse me. He had a fight canceled against Barboza earlier this year. He was going to fight in February, and now he's fighting Calvin Cater. So I'm going to take Steve Garcia in this one. My 4 weight on Steve Garcia. I'm 99% he is also the favorite in this card. But let me double check that just to be sure. Steven Garcia is a minus 130 favorite. Calvin Cater, a plus 102 dog. So, depending on what kind of seasoning you like, man, Calvin Cater could be value. If you just want to make value bets, Calvin Cater is the more experienced, grizzled veteran here, who in theory is more prepared for the moment. But in my opinion, Steve Garcia is just on too much of a hot streak. He's been decimating all of his opponents. In my opinion, Steve Garcia isn't so, he's not going to get like a deer in the headlights almost with getting on this feature fight to fight Calvin Cater. I think Steve Garcia is just head down. He's finishing guys, and he's going to keep his head down while he keeps finishing guys until he matches up against someone who's truly better than him. And, it could be like a Kai Kara France situation. Kai Kara France is just decimating everybody, and he won some fights as an underdog and got his title shot and got decimated. So, I don't know. We could see something like that with Steve Garcia, but that's a little ambitious to think a title shot for him quite yet. I think he's going to need to go further past Calvin Cater. But in this case, I'm going to take Steve Garcia to continue his crazy run. I'm not going to guarantee any finishes like he's been getting, but I do think he's going to be pushing for the finish. So, say you do bet on him at that number of minus 130, I think you're going to be getting good value considering I think he's going to be aggressive, right? You're going to have money on a guy who's going in for a finish. He's not just going to stand there and see what comes to him kind of thing. So, 4-weight Steve Garcia. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, Nick. So for this one, I'm going to agree with you. I have Steve Garcia as well. He is my 3-weight. And yeah, basically, like you said, things have not gone Kelvin Cater's way. He's just lost to nothing but dogs. Even the first fight he lost in the UFC was to Moicano back in 2018, then loses to Zabit, Max Holloway, Josh Emmett, Arnold Allen, Aljamain Sterling, Yusuf Zalal. Like, dude has not caught a break. And like he's got phenomenal boxing as well, but then like he goes against Max Holloway. Max Holloway shows like there's different levels to this, and then seems like other guys besides Giga Chikowski after that kind of figured him out because Josh Emmett's got phenomenal boxing. So does Arnold Allen. Aljamain Sterling offers more diverse style set with his grappling, and then Yusuf Zalal is also a phenomenal striker. So, and in this case, Steve Garcia as well, phenomenal striker. Out of his 17 wins, 14 come from KO/TKO. So he is a finisher, and honestly, um, even though Kelvin Cater's only been finished once in his career, I like Steve Garcia being able to finish him as well. If not, definitely, I think it's going to be a unanimous decision win for Steve Garcia. Steve Garcia, like himself, like he doesn't have that many losses, but he's already beaten some good names. And like even before he entered the UFC, he beat Jose Mariscal like in the LFA, finished him in the second round. And that's one of the last two people that Jose lost to. And so he's seen some good high level competition even before he entered the UFC, and he lost to Ricky Tercios back in 2016 by split decision as well. So granted, that was a long time ago, but he's fought dudes that have gone more elite than the average fighter and have entered the UFC and have looked good in the UFC. So he's already got that experience at a young age. Definitely not the same resume as Calvin Cater. But that being said, like it was a nice good build up, I think, and this is a good match now, like kind of like the Wonder Boy Thompson fight I was talking about earlier. Kelvin Cater, unfortunately, he may be able to make a run. Still, he's not. He's 37, and if he can rack up some wins, he can possibly get back in title contention. But this is a good fight that if Steve Garcia wins, he's gonna start getting some bigger dogs too. That he's gonna start getting Josh Emmett or Arnold Allen, the Yusuf Zalal himself, and against those dudes, I think he puts a really really good fight. So that being said, Steve Garcia is my three-way. I was making him my four-way, but I'm gonna stick with him as my three-way. I just overall think he's going to be the better fighter. Kelvin Cater, what he offers is obviously he offers some good KO slash knockout potential himself, but it's really been a minute since he's let that shine. And the last person he's really knocked out brutally was Jeremy Stevens, but Jeremy Stevens was also in at that. I mean, was already kind of heading out of the UFC at that moment. I know he kind of came back since then, but during that time, that was when right before they like let him go. And Jeremy Stevens is like, I'm sure if I click on his record, it's gonna be a lot of reds as of recently. Which, yep, it is a lot of red. Um, so that being said, yeah, this one I got Steve Garcia. I think he's just ultimately going to dominate more in the boxing department. I think he's just, and he also has a 3 inch reach advantage over Kelvin Cater, slightly bigger. I think he's just going to give Kelvin Cater a harder time. And even in the grappling department, I think Garcia is going to be the slightly better grappler. So I think he's just going to dominate this fight in like almost every aspect, to be honest. But definitely, I think this fight's going to be mostly on the feet, and I see Steve Garcia winning unanimously or being one of the very few people that actually put out Calvin Cater. So, that being said, I got Steve Garcia. I agree with you. He is my three-way.
Sounds good, man. That actually that ties it then. Well, that gives us two kind of co-locks of the week between Steve Garcia, Chris Curtis, honestly, with a tied 7 weight confidence points. Yeah, we'll see what comes to be from here, but just based on our current weights, we can't get anything that adds up to 7 or higher. So it seems like co-main, or should I say co-locks of the week for us here between Chris Curtis and Steve Garcia. We both got some confidence in those guys. And that's that. That said, I think Jose still has his 4 weight to give out for today.
Yeah, so for my four-way, this is actually going to be one of the other heavyweight bouts on this match, one of the three on the main card. And this one, honestly, they look like they should be both fighting at middleweight, but it's going to be Austin Lane versus Vitor Petrino. And Vitor Petrino in this one is moving up to heavyweight. And right now, the odds for this one, Vitor Petrino, even though he's the one moving up, he is the betting favorite at minus 650, while Austin Lane is a plus 420 underdog. This one, I picked it like it's one of those fights where like why even bother? But the thing, like Austin Lane, he's a Wisconsin boy. I really every time Austin Lane fights, like it sucks because there's most guys that are Wisconsin boys. I'm like, he's my boy. I'm gonna jump on him. Chuck Buffalo fights. I'm
Yeah,
gonna jump on him.
yeah,
Like like these boys, they're the boys. But Austin Lane is just. I'm really sorry, my boy, but like every time he fights, I just cannot like side with him because of his chin. Like the fact that Robles to Spain, they cut him probably just because he lost to Austin Lane alone. Like Robles to Spain, like he's not that good, but like okay, like he was on a tear, loses the WCA, and then like okay, like we'll give you one more shot, and they give him Austin Lane, and it was definitely to build up to Spain, but he loses to him, so then they can't do anything with this guy. So then they let him go, but somehow Austin Lane remains in the UFC, and dude just is got a highlight reel of being knocked out. And even like back in the day, like Greg Hardy knocked him out in the Dana White's Contender Series. And so it's just like I always felt like, and I've said this numerous times too, Austin Lane, I think he's a big tall guy, but I think he would have fared better at light heavyweight. Like he would have been a good lengthy dude, and he definitely would have carried some power down with him at light heavyweight. Maybe the weight cut's just too much, but he has one of those frames where like you can just tell he's not as thick as the other dudes. Like, if like compare Austin Lane to Derek Lewis, like one is super thick and short, and then Austin Lane is just taller and lengthy. And so, but that being said, like enough about like bashing Austin Lane like that. I'm pretty much just going with Vitor Petrino. He's moving up, so this is actually going to be, I think, not an easier fight, but Austin Lane probably won't will have an easier time not getting knocked out by Vitor Petrino, but Vitor Petrino's still a big dude. Even like at light heavyweight, he was still a big guy. So I think he's gonna fit in and look slightly smaller than Austin Lane, but not that much. Again, I think both guys are just small heavyweights. So I think what he's going to offer, though, going up to heavyweight, is he's going to have better stamina, cardio overall, because he doesn't have to. I doubt he's even cutting anything at all for this fight.
Hmm.
So I think he's just going to overall have better cardio, stamina, and even carry some power up to the heavyweight division with him. And I think he won't be able to put Austin Lane out like with a one hit cold KO, but I do think a couple punches over time will be a good TKO for him against Austin Lane. I do think he won't it won't be a big scary highlight knockout, but I do think it will be a finish for sure to some degree. So I'm going with Victor Petrino. You know, he was actually on a tear up until his last two fights, getting finished in the first round by Anthony Smith via submission. And honestly, that's really the only way Anthony Smith can really win these days. And then Dustin Jacoby as well, getting finished by him. Other than that, like Austin Lane will have power behind his punches, but one of the bigger dudes that Vitor Petrino's fought against. But I just overall think Vitor Petrino is good enough. Like he's got, I think, overall better striking, and I would say even better grappling. Like he may, I honestly even think he will probably get at least one takedown on Austin Lane at some point. So that being said, I got Vitor Petrino and how they match up even like, and then because I was talking about their physical sizes, yeah, Austin Lane is 6'6", Vitor Petrino is 6'2", but Vitor Petrino has a 77.5 reach while Austin Lane an 80-inch reach. So not that much of a difference. Mostly it's the height differentials is the slightest concern, but I think Vitor Petrino's gonna close the distance, and I could be maybe I'll be surprised and he will put out Austin Lane out cold. Again, I don't want to. This is like a pick more against somewhat against Austin Lane because dude just really does not have a chin. Like he's the dude. Like I go for like if he's fighting, I don't care who he's fighting. Just put them, they're gonna knock him out. And there's a good chance, like as of recently, 3 out of 4 times he's gonna get knocked out. So I'm going with those chances. I'm going with Vitor Petrino on this, and I think he's gonna get a finish as well. So that being said, yeah, I got Vitor Petrino. He's going to get the finish. He is the favorite, and I'm only assuming because Austin Lane is just genuinely not that good. So yeah, that's my pick. I got Vitor Petrino as my 4-weight. He's pretty confident. He's never fought at heavyweight, but it's just the level of competition that he's going to get from his opponent is why I'm picking this. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
Yeah, I don't have a pick, man, but um, it is a kind of a wonder why Austin Lane is kind of getting a pass more than other guys. Like, I feel like they would have dropped 9 out of 10 guys by now if it wasn't Austin Lane. I genuinely don't know what he brings to heavyweight that the UFC thinks they should have him signed. Like, I guess that's just a really kind of rude thing to say about a guy who could absolutely kick my butt on the street any day of the week. But it's just true. I mean, whether or not he could do that doesn't change the fact of the truth that he is just a very below average UFC fighter. And I think that's probably the best, easiest way to put it. And there's many more words that need to be said about it. Vitor Petrino is good. That's all. He's good. We'll see what he does at heavyweight. I didn't want to touch this one for those reasons, but there's no chance that you should be thinking Austin Lane's going to come in here and win this fight. So that said, I don't know.
Yeah,
Even Tapology ranks Austin Lane as the 65th worldwide heavyweight. 65th. There are multiple non UFC fighters above him
yeah.
in those rankings. But for whatever, like, it must be an agent thing. It must be he's good. He's good in interviews. He's good in meetings. I have no clue. That's all I got. I mean, that's genuinely all I got. Time will tell if Vitor Petrino can finish him, but I don't see a long future for Austin Lane in the UFC whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't see. Definitely, if he loses to Vitor, they're gonna have to cut him, I think. And even then, even Vitor, I don't even see him being at heavyweight long. I think maybe this was just a fight, man. Maybe he just wanted to test it out. And this is a good opponent to fight at heavyweight for him. But I definitely don't even see Vitor Petrino. I can see him coming back down to light heavyweight because I think that's where he just physically looks like he truly belongs. Like even like I was saying, Austin Lane. I think Austin Lane would have had a better UFC career if he would have like at least made the extra cut to cut down because he's actually a pretty lean guy and he does have power. But then he's you look like who's he finishing? Like who are these dudes that he's finishing? And some of them look actually really out of shape. And Vitor Petrino, you know, you're going to expect I honestly do think we're going to see the best in shape Vitor Petrino at heavyweight right now, but not a good enough heavyweight where he's going to beat elite like Tom Aspinall will definitely chew him up. So
Don't even bring
that
up,
being
dude.
said,
Aspinall's name does no. Don't even dare bring up a name like that, dude. We need to move on, man. Austin Lane doesn't even deserve this much discussion. Honestly, kind of
yeah,
feeling for real about that. Like that's that. Austin Lane sucks.
yeah, yeah. So that being
I'm
said,
good.
Nick has no pick in this one, but I got Vitor Petrino as my four way.
Yeah, dude. There's really no need to babble on, for the lack of a better term, on that one. That is a fight to go take a piss during the main card of UFC Nashville, unless you potentially just want to see a bum get finished. Moving forward, my three weight, I'm taking to a complete polar opposite. Thank goodness this fight will back up what is going to potentially be one of the more boring fights of UFC Nashville. Thank goodness for Nate the Train Landwehr coming in to fight Morgan the Frenchman Charrier. Actually, the very fight after the one we just discussed between two boring heavyweights and arguably one bad heavyweight. That said, Morgan Charrier is a Frenchman and honestly fits the Frenchman aesthetic, right? They kind of stand, they kind of strike, they don't have any aggressiveness whatsoever. That's pretty much what all French fighters are. Nate Landwehr, he's at least coming in with some aggressiveness. Late Landwehr, I think I just said late Landwehr. That was completely reversed. Nate Landwehr is also coming off of a loss. Doo Ho Choi took some elbows, took a loss. So Nate the Train is for sure not a perfect individual. In fact, if Nate the Train was a valued pick in this fight, he'd probably have more money on him. But in fact, Nate Landwehr is the underdog at plus 196. Charrier the Frenchman at minus 260. My pick here pretty much just boils down to the fact that Nate Landwehr is going to bring the pressure. Nate Landwehr is not going to stand there and let things come to him. Nate Landwehr will bring his fight to his opponent. And I think in this specific stylistic matchup, Morgan Charrier is not going to be able to handle it. Morgan Charrier is coming off a loss against Nate Wood, who Nate Wood is the smallest MFer. That dude's like 5'6". That dude's like 5'6". And he just beat Morgan Charrier in a striking match. What more needs to be said? He's fighting Nate Landwehr, the Train, who's half a foot taller almost, and way more aggressive. Way more aggressive. I'm not even going to go on. This is just simple. Nate Landwehr is going to come in Charrier's face and win rounds 1 and 2 at the very least. Charrier, his best hope is winning the third round. That's his best hope. His best hope is losing the fight 18-19 and winning the third round. There's just no chance in my mind. Charrier has a negative striking differential. He stands there in these boring fights. Nate Landwehr is going to win the crowd. Nate Landwehr is going to win the judges with action. And it's really as simple as that. I can't predict the finish, but Nate Landwehr and his aggressiveness, if I could speak, straightforward. Easy pick. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, this one I don't have a rank on it, but yeah, I like your pick with Nate Landwehr. I do think he's going to be just the more aggressive fighter, and I like to see I do think he'll get a finish. You know, half of his wins, you know, he's a finisher. He's gained by KO as TKO, and as you mentioned, like nothing against the Frenchmen in general, but like they are a little bit slower starters. They are very technical, but it's kind of like you know, if you get a little chaos mixed into there, like their technicality doesn't matter how technical they are, like how do they deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's going to happen. Like,
Yep.
you know, Nate Landwehr is just going to get him out of his rhythm and make him have to engage in a dogfight, which I don't think will play to his favor, and he'll definitely lean toward Nate Landwehr's favor. So I like Nate Landwehr. I do not have a pick. I do not have a weight on it, but I do pick Nate Landwehr.
Yeah, man. Even against like Chepe, right? In a guy in a fight against a guy who will stand there and bang with you, Chepe outdogged him. Chepe just outdogged him. Landed 20, 26, 20 something more strikes. You know, it was a split decision on the scorecards, but maybe somewhat is biased for Chepe because I'm a big Chepe fan. But Cherrier just doesn't have the juice for this fight. Cherrier needs a different stylistic matchup, in my opinion, where a guy isn't going to put the pressure on him. If he was more of a counter striker with power, that would be an advantage. But I think for now, Nate Landwehr, he's approaching the end of his real UFC relevance at 37 years old. So give me Nate Landwehr to finish off a couple of strong fights before he rides off in the sunset. So that said, Jose, I believe that leaves it up to somehow process of elimination. You know, anyone who's watched us for at least long enough to know knows that I don't think there's been a show here in which we haven't picked the main event for any of our picks, and that's definitely going to continue. But anyone who's been listening may be aware that we have not yet discussed the main event, and both of us are down to our one weights. I will let Jose take it from here.
Yes, so for what comes down to our one weights, this is, yeah, of course, the main event, the heavyweight bout between Derek Lewis and Taliesin Teixeira. Right now, uh, Derek Lewis is the betting underdog at plus 230, while Teixeira is the betting favorite at minus 310. Um, this one I was conflicted on, but to be honest, like my reasonings of why I used to choose Derek Lewis a lot is just comes down to he's got the most knockouts in heavyweight history. He can take a lot of damage. Somehow you can out wrestle him and take him down a lot, and he just finds ways to get up still. Um, but that's just with age and just over time. Like it's not the same Derek Lewis that knocked out Curtis Blades, that knocked out Alexander Volkov, and competed in there with Daniel Cormier and Junior Dos Santos. It's just that Derek Lewis is definitely a thing of the past, and I think he started to become a thing of the past, especially after Tai Tuivasa knocked him out. Since then, he's been struggling with the younger guns, like or just other dudes that have just as equal power, like Sergey Pavlovich, Sergey Spivak, and most recently Jelton Almeida. He's gotten some wins in there, but like the Rodrigo Nascimento fight, again, it's just like these are just fights where he's almost just throwing caution to the wind, and he's just taking all risk and all like taking a lot of risk and giving all power, and he's just landing the very few shots that he's throwing, like he's just like if he doesn't have to throw many shots, but if one of them connects, it can be lights out. And Rodrigo Nascimento made that mistake, and then Marcos Rodrigo de Lima, like how fast that happened. Like, of course, no one thought Derek Lewis was gonna come in hot like that, but Derek Lewis was already on a 3-fight losing streak at that moment, and I think he just knew like, hey, if I don't get this win, like his UFC career could be over and whatnot. So that's why Derek Lewis just threw caution to the wind and came in hot and heavy like that. Talshin Teixeira, he's just too young, athletic, and and just big, I think, for him to fall into any traps like that from Derek Lewis. So I do have Talshin Teixeira as my one weight. I think he's going to win this. I don't know if he'll knock out Derek Lewis. As I mentioned, Derek Lewis he has been knocked out, but he's not the easiest guy to knock out. And I'm interested to see how Talis Teixeira is going to deal with putting Derek Lewis on his back, if he's going to even get him to his back, and if he does, how long will it be able to hold him there? Because again, Derek Lewis, Talis Teixeira, he's 6'7". Derek Lewis is 6'3", but he's a thick man. I think on the feet, Teixeira is probably going to fare off. He's going to be better off, like being a taller guy, having a 4-inch reach advantage. We seen again like Alexander Volkov, who is a phenomenal striker and he's really tall and lengthy. Derek Lewis was losing that entire fight until he threw caution to the wind and just threw a last minute haymaker and connected. And so I can see him doing something similar to Talshin Teixeira, where it plays out where Talshin Teixeira is just piecing them up and just beating them nonstop on the feet. and then last minute, I think that's where Teixeira is going to be really be smart and actually shine and know like, hey, Derek Lewis knows he's losing. He knows that the fight's about to be over. Like, you got to be ready for him to just out of nowhere burst out because like sometimes Derek Lewis looks like he is gassed, but he's just I think he's almost just charging and loading up. So while he maybe you land a couple body shots or hits on him, he's just taking in breathers so then he can just throw the very few haymakers he has left in him. And I can see that happening where Teixeira beats him 4 to 5 rounds, and then the last bit of the fight, Derek Lewis is just going to become explosive and just throw haymakers left and right. And I think Teixeira will use his size and athleticism to an advantage to just avoid that and win this. I think unanimous. I don't know if he'll put Derek Lewis out or stop him, but I think he'll just be able to win this unanimously. So I have to share, but he is my one way because it's the Black Beast, and it doesn't he doesn't need that many punches. Is if one of them connects, it's lights out. So I got to share as my one way. What are your thoughts on this one, Nick?
That's Derek Lewis, man, right? That's Derek Lewis. He's a one hit KO machine. That's what Derek Lewis has done his entire career, and that's what he'll always be known for. So that said, I agree. I've got Texera as my one weight. I will say, is so hesitant, man. Like I can't believe how back and forth I'm going, literally as we speak, because there's just like things I'm seeing both ways. Like, oh, I see Derek Lewis, and it's like he's experienced in 5 round fights, very many 5 round fights that we didn't even need to go into it. Dallas and Teixeira, second career UFC fight is 5 rounds. I believe I can't remember his name. I believe some other fighter had that. Well, Kaya Sakura, right, got the challenge, the title challenge in his first fight. But I'm trying to think. There was a guy that was like a young prospect though that got like thrust into a 5 round fight early in his career, and he got absolutely decimated. It was a joke, and I can't remember who it was. But it's almost just like taking Texera to me still feels really risky because you don't have much to show, right? Yeah, okay, he beat Justin Tafa. That's like beating Austin Lane. That's what I'd say. I guess Justin Tafa and Austin Lane, I think, fought twice because the first one ended in a no contest. Okay, Justin Tafa is maybe a little better than Austin Lane, just a little. But still, that's enough to say he's beating Derek Lewis. Like, I was thinking about this. I saw a video on YouTube. It was a stupid short on YouTube. And it was Derek Lewis was saying, he was in an interview, and he was literally saying, like, yeah, I would cheat. And what he meant was like, he will poke a guy in the eye knowing he's going to get a warning, right? He admitted in his first UFC fight that he pushed the guy up on the cage and kneed him in the nuts. He was like, yeah, I just needed to like calm my nerves a little bit. Like Derek Lewis straight up admitted to like, and it's like, don't hate the player, hate the game. They need to basically not allow a warning. You need to get the warning in the back, right? And then the first time it happens in the cage, you're getting penalized. Simple as that. That's how it should be. That's how you avoid that shit. But it's not. You get a warning. So because you get a warning, Derek Lewis, maybe if he feels a little bit like slighted, he's like, man, this ain't working out. Oops. My bad, I got his eye. Ooh, shit. I hope that ain't too bad, dude. You know what I'm saying? And that could really, I don't know, little things like that. But in the end, I'm sticking with Texiera as my one weight. That means my least confident pick of my 5 picks for this UFC Nashville card. And it's just because, man, I still feel like he's going to have the youth and the speed advantage. And he is bigger. Like, I think you pointed out the size matchup there. Like, Taliesin Teixeira is not only taller, he's wider. I mean, he's huge. It's crazy, though, because he actually weighed in, I believe, in his fight against Tafa, 258. So, still technically shy of the limit for heavyweight, even though he's that much bigger. So, with all that said, I just mean to say, I think his speed, hopefully, is going to be noticeable. I think with the speed, he can land more strikes, and Derek Lewis is still going to do Derek Lewis things and just stand there and try and get power. Derek Lewis does not care about how many strikes he lands because he's just trying to land the one that knocks him out. So, I think for Taliesin to win this fight, he's got to avoid, of course, but also by peppering those shots, he'll get the rounds easy. And yeah, it's literally one of the easiest bets you could make. Taliesin Teixeira by decision or Derek Lewis by KO. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, That's the only way I look at this fight going. The thing is, too, yeah, if Teixeira, yeah, as you mentioned, just we haven't seen enough of him either. So, otherwise maybe I would have been more confident in him, but just all his fights have been in the first round, and at least Derek Lewis, as you mentioned, he's at least proven that he can make it to 5 rounds. So, sometimes fighters drastically change, especially he's not been in the UFC as
Yeah,
nearly as long as Derek Lewis, and
yeah,
so I'm hoping, he's at a point now where we've seen enough. Everyone has seen enough of Derek Lewis to know what to expect in those later rounds. So
mm-hmm.
he's young and athletic. So as long as he just doesn't gas himself out, let the adrenaline get to him, and he stays focused on the dangers that Derek Lewis brings in the later fourth and fifth round, I think he should at least get this unanimous win. So this is one we definitely agree on,
Yeah.
but obviously low confidence.
Yeah, we definitely agree. That's 100% true. And I guess said earlier just a little bit maybe too confidently about Texiera winning by decision. There's a chance like if you look at it fight by fight, Texiera has 7 KO wins of his 8 career wins. So you would be inclined to say, well, no, he's a knockout artist. He's likely to get a knockout. But yeah, I guess just call me a doubter of the guys he fought in the past, especially compared to Derek Lewis, right? If we're talking about him fighting, you know, Rodrigo Nascimento, well, I guess that's not a heavyweight. But, just like a random other heavyweight that's better than Austin Lane, but not like top 10, like that would be a little bit different. I could see Teixeira by KO in that situation, but I don't know. It's really hard for me to see Teixeira getting a KO. But who's to say, man? Heavyweights, especially. That's why I never condone betting with heavyweights, especially now that John Jones is retired. Because John Jones was the only heavyweight I'd like to bet on. But nowadays, that stuff's very volatile, man. You got to be careful, very careful, if you're going to be taking Derek Lewis's side or Teixeira's side, because that's a slippery slope, man. One punch on either guy's end finishes this. So, quick recap though. Co-locks of the week for us here. Agreements are 7 total combined points, with Chris Curtis being 7 combined points between us both, and Steve Garcia as well. So I guess a little parlay could be made there with the 2, and that would be our parlay. Let me see. Actually, I could quickly check what's the odds of Curtis plus Garcia. I am kind of curious. But while I look that up, what do we have for probably our underdog of the week? Didn't we agree on Wonder Boy, or no? That was I had 5 weight against Wonder Boy. It was Nate Landwehr. You didn't have him as a weight, but you agreed on Landwehr, right, Jose?
Yeah, I agree on Landwehr. Other than that,
So
the
what was
rest,
your
yeah,
lock
we
of the
just
week? Vitor's a favorite, right?
yeah, Vitor's the favorite. Chris Curtis was the favorite too. I thought Chris Curtis was
So
gonna be my dog, but Steve Garcia is also a favorite. Wonder Boy is my only
Wonder Boy's
dog I
your only
chose.
dog. So technically Landwehr is, because he's my 3 weight, slightly more confident. So technically Landwehr is the MMA line lock of the week is all I'm saying. You know what I mean? All right, so Steve Garcia is minus
Sir,
130. Chris Curtis. Shoot, that's right. They have this fight way too early on the card. So that's plus 133 for Garcia plus Curtis. That's not too bad. Hey, that's not too bad. Curtis should really beat Max Griffin, no doubt about it. And Calvin Cater is a little harder to bet against, but still, man, Steve Garcia has actually been a dog. So I don't know. Just saying, something to look at. Either way, Jose and I will be there in person. I believe we'll be able to get you guys a show live from Nashville. So no split screen in that one. That'll be exciting. So make sure to subscribe and put noties on or something, because it's going to be earlier in the day too. It's not going to be the normal Monday afternoon like this week. It'll have to be, I think, around noon or something. We're going to have to do it like midday, right before or after lunch, because Jose will be flying back pretty much right afterwards. So thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your week. We'll be back as always for our next card next week.